Fixed it.
I think we're live. Yep. Says we're live. Got a little red dot on the mobile app. Brilliant.
Whoop, whoop.
Cool. Let's rock.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Richard. How's your day been?
Tough. It's
Tough.
been a long day.
It's been a long day. Well,
It's been eventful work-wise, and then my little dog was a dick when I took it for a walk. Sorry for the language, people, but
no
he
one
ran
likes-
away down an embankment, up the other side, chasing squirrels. He then got told off for it and then immediately did it again, crossing a little brook and refusing to come back. So, yeah, he got put on his lead after that and his fun was over.
That's nothing. I burnt my tongue with some soup today.
Oof, hardcore. What a day you've had.
What a day. What a day. Yeah, I don't want to hear about you're complaining.
But right now, it's okay. I'm at home, got some beers, and we're gonna do some streaming.
Yep. So we should probably introduce ourselves first. Why don't you go for it first, Richard?
Excellent. So, good evening, even. It's a bit later than usual. But yeah, my name's Richard Bradshaw, often known as Friendly Tester, and I'm currently the boss at Ministry of Testing and generally just love to chat about testing. How about yourself?
I'm Mark Winteringham, 2-bit tester on Twitter. I like to think of myself as a tinkerer of test automation tools. Always playing around with what's fun and cool and buzzy, and that's what we're going to do now. And I also work at Ministry of Testing as well. But let's not talk about that today. Let's talk about fun tool stuff.
Is Rest Assured buzzy?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if Rest Assured is really buzzy. It's been around for a while, but I think it's definitely a tool that's very popular with people who are in the API testing space, especially working with Java.
I think it is. It's not a buzzy tool, but it's just one of those tools that you want in there. If you end up in a Java project and you're going to be doing some API automation, there's a high possibility you might end up using Rest Assured.
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings about it, as we'll probably discuss as we go forward. But I've worked with a few alternatives, and I find some of the other ones less friendly. It's the classic issue of working with Java is that it can be quite boilerplatey at times. So actually having a tool that's trying to sort of abstract some of that away for you is quite handy, even though sometimes I feel that the choices made are not stuff that I would go for, but as personal taste. So yeah, so if we haven't already gathered, we're going to be looking at Rest Assured for this session. We are going to try and build some API tests against automation in testing.online, which is our free-to-use test automation playground. You can find it on automationintesting.online. If I just close the pop-up down. And this month it's being very kindly supported by Source Labs, and we will be talking a little bit more about Source Labs in future streams, future get-togethers. But yeah, so Automation in Testing Online is based off of RESTful Booker platform. So this is the code base for Automation in Testing.online, and it's basically a B&B system where you can customize your homepage, add in rooms, and people can book these rooms and choose dates and fill things in. And there's a whole admin panel at the back here. And yeah.
And if I wanted to use it, can I use it?
Yes, you can. You can use it by logging in. You can log in with the very secure username and password of admin password, which even to this day I still sometimes get wrong, which is shocking. Shocking.
But it is, yeah, we are going to use that, and as Mark said, it's a playground for practicing all your automation efforts as well. So if you're ever wondering, thinking of a website where you just want to, log on and download some, practice some automation, then you can use our RBP.
Yep. So we're going to try working with a few GET requests and then maybe do some more POST requests. A lot of the functionality of this is behind authorization and authentication. So we're going to work out how we can get around that so that we can create things like rooms and bookings and that sort of stuff. So the first thing that we need to do is get set up. So rest assured or rest-assured.io. That's really difficult to say.
Rest assured.io. Rest dash assured. Dash assured. Yeah, dash assured is really hard to say.
Dash assured, yeah.
There we go. Prime takeaway from today's Twitch. Dash assured is really hard to say.
How was the stream? They just said dash assured for about 45 minutes. Cool. So I think we go to downloads in the documentation, and that's the zip files. But I'm looking for the Maven thing, which I thought was on the main page. Let's see. Getting started. Always good for getting started. There you go. Lovely. Oh, it's gone up to 410 or 410. Yep, because I'm old school. We're gonna use Maven to import the dependency. And
See, you're saying old school, right? But I don't like Gradle.
well, I was seeing some arguments on Twitter about how like Maven and Gradle are sort of tools of the past now, and that I saw mention of 2 or 3 other different like management systems similar to Maven and Gradle that were being recommended, but I wish I could remember what they were. But there was quite an interesting debate about how how it is with like a lot of tools is that there's their constant need to add features, but features equal bloat, and that can be problematic in its own right. So
Interesting.
but yeah.
All right, though. But API world. So got Java project, Maven project. We've got our dependencies. So JUnit now. So what we're going to use JUnit for?
So we need to use JUnit as the runner to trigger our tests. So we need something that will actually execute our rest assured code.
You got any issues with JUnit, Mark?
No, I like JUnit. I've yet to play with JUnit 5, and that's maybe something we could do in another stream as well, because I believe there's a lot of new features and stuff that have been added into JUnit 5. But I'm going to go with JUnit 4, and I'm going to go Maven, because I'm trying to find it. There we go. There we go.
While Mark's doing that, some of you will see my mouse is on the screen too. We are remote pairing, which is pretty cool. It's kind of the basis of doing these Twitches. So me and Mark, we teach a class together called AIT, Automation and Testing, and we just both, in our own times, realized we were both tinkering with tools, trying to add new tools to our tool belts. And we thought, you know what, why not pair online and do it together and learn at the same time. And then we thought, why not stream it? So that is literally what you're watching. So
brings you to
it's
here.
pretty cool. And I think this is our 4th, is it? I think
this is our 6th.
Oh wow, okay.
I think we've done 2 Postman, DevTools. We did a different one. It's our 5th. We did React Testing Library as well.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Okay. So back into the API space, because you've been beavering away. So you've added JUnit to our Maven project. If you're not familiar with Maven, as we mentioned, it's going to manage our dependencies for us. Basically, in other terminology, it's going to download rest assured and JUnit to allow us to use them.
Yep.
In our project.
This is horrendous. This annoys me already, so I'm going to just lowercase the BP in this. Okay, yeah. Let's create our first test.
Well, it's fun because I don't think we've done anything Java-based yet. So why did that annoy you so much?
I think it's just the fact that classes need to be capsed, but I don't like it when I see things where it's capsed, unless it's absolutely necessary, like you're using something domain specific that's capsed. Um, Having the camel case to make it more readable, I think, is important.
Okay, cool.
So let's create a new first test. I'm going to call it get something because I don't know what we're going to get yet. So what should we have a play with?
So we mentioned we've got a deployed instance of RBP, and there is many APIs that we can hit. So Mark's saying I'm going to do a get, which is me basically means the get. I was going to say request, but what's the official terminology for it? Is it a method? What is get? What is get, post, put, and patch? And
It's an HTTP method, but if you are talking about it in the context of RESTful architecture, then it is a verb because you're sort of declaring an intent that you want to carry out on a specific endpoint. But if you're not following RESTful architecture, it's known as a method. And I think actually, if you look in here, yeah, it's called a method here, so they don't go with the term verb within DevTools.
so I think we should do probably get branding because I think it's the one that doesn't have any protection on it.
Yep. Yep. So let's go
So
back
we,
to the
me and
front
Mark,
page.
obviously, well, Mark wrote most of this, but just for context, branding is what you makes loads what you can see here. So, not to bring back up the fact that it's sponsored, which is great, but if someone bought our B&B system, they could brand it themselves. So the branding API, as Mark's about to show us, and I forget that we pair, so I can click on this too. Brings us back key information about this B&B. So we can bring back the name of the B&B, its location, which is quite important if you're staying in a hotel, its logo, a description, and then there's some contact information which gets rendered at a contact form at the bottom. So I think we should try and do a get on that URL.
Yep. I should just say, for all of you who may have noticed that it says email and then shows a URL, I'm aware of that. It was just a very hacky, horrible thing that I had to do one night. Yeah, we should do this. So let's.
So one thing I'd like to say here is as well, like we're doing this in the correct way as far as I'm concerned. So we like to put a lot of testing advice into this. We don't really we're trying to learn a tool, but with any automation that you're trying to take on, you should really you should know what you want to be automating. So I would like for us to agree here, Mark, what we would like to do before we try and build it. So
Well,
what is our check? What
uh,
are we trying to do?
I would say to begin with, let's just let's check to make sure that we get a 200 status code back. So we're sort of
Perfect.
just making sure that we're actually getting a positive response back from branding.
And on that note as well, obviously, if you are working in the API space, you might use a tool like Postman to make sure your API is fully functional and working before obviously you try and automate it with Rest Assured, because as we're about to see, you won't really see anything happen.
Hmm.
Or as we're using here, we can take advantage of DevTools
Yeah.
because our front end's written in React, which means we can see all the API calls and we know that this is working correctly. So we're going to go ahead and automate it.
Yep. So let's go in here. So we start a rest assured test, or we start a request from rest assured by calling given. And then if I import that, so I did Alt or Option Enter, and that imports it. And we can just call get. So one of the good things about rest assured I find is that a lot of the methods are quite clearly named and their intention is quite clear. So I can put get, and that's very much telling me that that's going to do me a get request. And then from there, I'm going to paste in the URL. And let's grab that from here.
So again, like might be obvious to a lot of people who watch this, watching it or watch it back afterwards. Obviously, all this stuff is in the documentation. We've happened to use Rest Assured many times. So usually, yeah, we would head to the docs and work out what methods we need to call, but we know what they are. So as Mark's typing there, He's brought in an object called response, which again, rest assured, out the box, has created this to make it easy, funny enough, to handle the response.
Mm,
So we'll have that object at the end. So far we've written response. We're giving it the name response, and we're saying given when you get this URL, and then we mentioned we wanted to do a 200.
yeah,
So as far as rest assured's happening now, that would call that URL
yeah.
and get a response.
So there's two ways in which you can cut this, and this is where my personal gripes with Rest Assured come from. Is that the way that they tend to encourage is that I would do then. Oops, just put my dot there, and then
Where's the when mark?
exactly, and then I think I see I don't use this very often,
It
but
is called status code,
yep, then status
but
code
they have two though. So
200.
yeah, they have one that takes an int, and then they also have one that takes something else.
Yeah, so we can run this actually. So let's give that a crack and see what
So you just
happens.
deleted that response. Why did you do that?
Because I think I jumped the gun a little bit there. But we'll come back to the response second because so the reason why I stopped assigning it to a variable is because Rest Assured has done the test for us. So everything that I've written there, that is the test or the check. So that's done, like I say, that's done the get request, got some information, and then it's run. Dot status code is a type of, it's like a special type of assertion within Rest Assured that says status code equals 200. Now, my sort of gripe with this is imagine you had 30 of these tests all written for like like so I'd get this, get that, get this, get that, and they were all doing custom assertions. If something like the URL changed, then I've got to go through and change that in every one of those um, tests. So what I'd like to do is I like to extract some of this stuff out into its own function or method. So get branding, and that's going to return me a response. So I can do return, and then we're going to take the first two lines. There we go. And then I can go response, response equals get branding. And then I can do something like assert that response dot status code. So this will just retrieve the status code for me is 200. So let's import the necessary stuff. So good thing about JUnit, it's got assertion libraries built into it.
Do you know what Hamcrest means?
It means matches.
It does.
Anagram. It's an anagram. Yes, I do remember that. Okay, so now if I run
love
this
that
again,
fact.
I do like it when people do fun things with names of stuff. So okay, so it's done.
All right, so let's walk through that a little bit, Mark. Can you write the old one as it was, and let's compare them side by side, or just quickly copy another one?
Yeah, let's do another one. Test. All right, example given dot get. Oops. And paste in there. Oh, it's already there, so we can do that. Dot then. It was status code, wasn't it? 200.
Yeah, 200.
And I think also actually something that jumps out to me here is just by doing this very quickly is that you've got a method called status code that does something different depending on what's before it. So response.status code does something very different to .then.status code, which again, not sure how I feel about that.
So the reason I got you to do them side by side is so we can like look at the advantages. So obviously we know good practice is to abstract things away, as you mentioned. If I had 20 get branding checks, then obviously I don't want to have to change the URL 20 times. So I could have just abstracted the URL away into a property at the top and use that value throughout it. Or as Mark's done, we can make a new method called getBranding. And then obviously if we could in the future have a class just full of all the endpoints
Yep.
and pull those into our test classes.
Yep.
Because again, we don't really want to be seeing implementation in our test files.
Yep.
Ideally, we just want to be calling them.
So we could create a class called branding, and I can take this get branding. Drop this.
You know what you could call it, Mark? You could call it response objects.
Ooh.
Like page objects, but response objects. Or you could call it what it actually is, abstraction and decent coding practices.
Actually, I don't normally call this. I call this the API. When I typically do this. Okay, so let's make that public, and then we can come back here and we could say, so branding equals new branding. And again, this I'd probably refactor so that it was called.
Oh, that's me. Sorry.
Branding.
Basically, I can't get into the Twitch app, so I'm going to try and load it on the website because I can't see if anyone has comments and so forth, which we've had a few in the last few Twitches. So I am going to work out how I get to that screen while you carry on.
Well, so that's a nice way to clean stuff up. Is that you end up with a package filled with all of your classes for each of your APIs or services. So RESTful Booker platform has multiple APIs, so I can have multiple classes for each API, and then inside that I have methods that are very much specifically focused on ways in which I'm interacting with the API. So get branding, post branding, put branding, delete branding, that sort of stuff. And then we can get quite sophisticated with this. We could have a base class that branding API is built off and any other API is built off, so that we could set like a host, so that if we want to quickly change change environments, we just have to change it in one spot. But there we go. So that's kind of how to very quickly build a GET request, and I think that's one of the things I do really like about REST Assured. It's very easy. I mean, even if you go with this route of using the given thens and keeping everything inside one test, that's 4 lines of code. And for Java, that's I'd say that's pretty damn good.
Yes, pretty damn well. And plus, I know we chatted a lot there, but really, if you were comfortable with it and you just downloaded it, went away, you could have had that get written in 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it is that easy to get up and running.
Yep. Cool. So next thing I want to look at is posting something.
Sure.
But if we want to post to something like branding or anything else, what we need to do is we need to actually we need to be logged in to do that, which means that we need cookies added to a request. So before we can do that, we need to work out how we can actually get a token from the auth API that we can then eventually use in other API calls.
Yeah, so just you tinker away. To just elaborate on that, we want to, so Mark kind of inferred there that our goal is to get to a point where we can update branding and then do another call on it and check it's there. Before we do that though, Mark, is there anything else you want to do with that status for get? Like, are you happy with just checking the status code, or would you?
I am.
Do you want to elaborate on our assertion for now and do different assertions later on?
I am for now, because I think so. Like we've looked at ways in which we can assert on a status code. The other areas of an HTTP response that we can assert on are the body, and you could also assert on the headers. Excuse me. Not so concerned about headers right now, but actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how we can actually parse a response and get some value out of that we could eventually do some assertions on. So I'm happy with that get. Let's change this so that it says get branding now. So I'm quite happy with that get
Okay.
branding test, but we're going to do something more sophisticated with the post login that's going to start doing stuff with the the response.
So one more has that up. RESTful Booker has an endpoint called auth, and as we mentioned jokingly at the start, it is hard coded, but you do obviously have to fill the form in and click send. So as Mark's about to do that, we'll see the request come in that we need. And it is as straightforward as you're about to expect. We basically send username and password as JSON.
Yep.
And that's what we need to mimic in our rest assured.
Yep. So we need to send some parameters or a body to the post request, and then we need to get the response back and parse that. So let's start with building this payload first that we're going to send. So to do that in rest assured, we create POJOs or plain old Java objects. And I'm going to need to, so I'm going to create a new package. So again, I'm going to need to create a new class. So for this, I'm going to call it Payloads. And inside here, we're going to create a new class and we're going to call it
Auth,
auth.
I guess.
Yeah, auth request, because we're going to get a response later. That'll do for now.
So if you go back to the API, back to I'm saying if you go back, I can do it myself. I'm just wondering. I've never really pondered too much on it myself as a name point, but like, so it's a payload for login. That's the final endpoint, isn't it? And login happens to be the method that's on auth.
Yeah.
So for a potential naming convention, I don't know if anyone, people were watching this back on YouTube, etc. If you have anything, please add a comment about how you name yours. But like potentially auth login request to make it really clear what it is.
Yeah, I think let's do that. Auth login request. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to create a Java object that matches the same structure as the JSON object that was sent in that request in the browser. So if I go back here, I can see that we send two parameters. We send username and password. So in this class, I'm going to call first one private string username, and the next one private string password. Okay, and that's all that there is to this payload. So we now need to make sure we need to be able to create this object that we're going to pass into rest assured. So let's
getters and setters.
Getters and setters. So we
what
build.
Did you just do? What was that magic? I was expecting you to painfully sit there and type. What did you do?
I don't want to bore everyone to death. So Control N in IntelliJ basically gives you a shortcut menu of ways in which you can generate standardized methods. So here I just chose generate getters and setters, and what it does is it looks at the variables within your class and says I'll create getters and setters for you for those. So if I click OK here, boom, we get everything we need.
Snazzy. I've used Lombok in the past.
Yep, Lombok, and I think Lombok works quite nicely with rest assured as well. And Lombok, just for those of you who don't know what that is, Lombok allows you to attach annotations, Java annotations, rather than write all this sort of boilerplate code out.
It's like magic.
Speaking of annotations,
does it for you?
We need to add in this tag, JSON property, so that it's clear to rest assured how it's like. This is like the glue. This annotation is the glue that will convert basically this variable name and make sure that it's actually called username in the payload that it sends, and then extracts the value out. Now that's red because I actually require some more dependencies, and these are the Json dependencies, and I'm terrible at remembering terrible at remembering which of the Json libraries that are required. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to
Just
go.
search on that page. I think you'd find it.
I did, and didn't get anything. So I did
What, you searched for Json?
Jackson. Didn't get it. It's all right. I'm going to cheat because I've got a
It's
here.
probably because you're in Firefox. It's
It's
not a very good browser.
Rest assured, POM XML. So
Search
here's one
doesn't
I
work.
made earlier. These dependencies are a little out of date, but they'll do for now. They'll do for now. Perfect.
I don't think you need the one above. I think you just need core, but you can try.
I think you need data bind as well. Okay, so these libraries, these Json core libraries and Json data bind libraries, they're responsible for turning a Java object into a JSON payload. And as you'll see later, we can also do it the other way around. So we can have a JSON payload turned into an object. Cool, so we're going to import those. Perfect. So we've got everything that we need now to create our request. So now, just for ease, we're going to create our test, not extract anything, just straight away. So we do a body, because we're sending a body, but we need to create that first. So let's do auth login request, auth payload, I'm going to call it, equals new auth login request, username, password. It's a very, very secure API. And then, so we pass this auth login request object into the body. So now that's part of our HTTP request constructed. Now we need to give it a URL. So do post. And then let's go back to our code here.
/login. Yeah.
Lovely. And then again, we should just get a response. So response from that. And then I'm going to cheat a little bit here. So I'm just going to do a system out. We're going to do response dot get body dot pretty print.
Pretty print.
Pretty
Lovely
print.
shortcut, pretty print.
Yeah. So this will just output the response body as a string, but it'll honor things like line breaks and stuff like that. So
and based on what we saw from people looking very closely on Firefox, there we're expecting a token to be written out.
Yep. So let's click run. And oh, so I forgot something.
You did. What? Yeah, I know what you forgot.
So I forgot to add
content type.
Yes, I forgot to add relevant headers. So I need to add a content type header as I'm sending a JSON payload, eventually sending a JSON payload. So I need to tell the API that the request that I'm sending is a JSON payload. So
otherwise it doesn't know how to deal with it. If you're not familiar with API testing, if you don't tell it what the raw text is, it obviously can't tell because it's just a big block of raw text.
Yep.
So we have to tell it what it is.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different ways in which you can do this. So you can call header, and you can create a header object in that, and that just adds in a key value pair. Or you can do headers and then do like a map of lots of header objects. But because we're doing a content type, and content type's quite a popular and common header that's used, again, rest assured has made it nice and easy for us, so we can just do content type. And I could put it in as a string, but actually I'm going to put it in as a, I can never quite remember. It's this is an enum, isn't it? Content type.json. Is that an enum?
Yes.
Or a literal? I can never quite remember which the two is.
Enum, maybe. Who knows? Don't know.
I'm sure we'll get an answer on that at some point. Okay, so I've added the content type of JSON. I've set the URI. So now if we run this again, goes green. Although it didn't print out anything, which is quite surprising. So let's see what happened, because I didn't get a printout there. So let's do response.get status code. See what happened there. Oh, I got 403. I got a 403. Oh, because it's not username.
Oh, you can't. You're not.
No, it's admin. Oops.
Yeah.
So that's the expected to get a 403 because I put the wrong credentials in. 200. Perfect. So our next challenge is this. So as I say, if we do get body dot pretty print.
Token.
Yeah.
Two tokens.
I don't know why it's outputted to. Oh, it's because this section logs out stuff as well, I believe. Right, so now we need to extract that token because I want to use that somewhere else in a future test. But let's say the assertion for this one is that I want to make sure that this token is a certain character length or certain length, because I can't assert that it's the same token each time because it's auto-generated, but I could sort of do an assertion to say it's a specific length. So I need to create another Pojo. This time we're going to call this one auth. I'm going to follow your sort of approach. Auth login response.
One thing to note here for a few people who might be a bit further down their automation journey or even considering starting one. Obviously, in this instance, we're talking very specific terminology in terms of, well, actually, let me rephrase that, very specific names, as in if the API responds with a certain attribute or property, then we have to match that name, otherwise it will fail to parse. So we've called it token and it will look for token. You can tell it what to look for if you wanted to give it a different name.
Mm-hmm.
But it might feel like building up these Pojos becomes tedious. But actually, if you really do have a multi-layered stack, you can reuse these Pojos for your web automation, for your mobile automation. Any place where you need to manage data, you could potentially reuse these Pojo files.
Yep.
So it's not a case of rewriting them all the time. It's once you've built them up once, then yeah, you can reuse them throughout your whole architecture.
Yep. So I've created the auth login response. We only have one parameter, which is token. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do something slightly different. Is I'm going to create an auth login response, and I'll call it auth response. And then from the response we got here, I'm going to call response dot as, and then I'm going to put in the class that I want it to use as the template to extract the values and give me an object out of. So for this one, it's the auth login response, which has the token parameter, and I'll do dot class. And then
I think I'm about to learn something.
And then if we do, so we'll do an assertion. We'll say assert that. How many characters is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can confirm it is 16. So we can say auth response dot get token dot length is 16. So let's give that a run.
So while that runs, I assume you're going to teach us why you've gone with auth login request and response instead of just response. Once we fixed your failure. Did you do the annotations correctly?
Oh, no, I know why this is. It's because the response... No, I don't know why that is. So, cannot construct instance... Cannot deserialize from object.
So let's go and look at your Pojo. Let's just look at your Pojo. JSON prop. But yeah, it's spelled correct.
String. I wonder if let's go with response. So my naming convention, I would say, is all over the place at the moment, really. I would typically like response. I'd give that a clearer name. So like auth login response would be that probably, and then I would probably chain the .as at the end of the post. So if I was to extract all of this out into its own method, the method would be post, and it would return a response of, it probably return that or something like that. Depends what you want to do. Anyway, let's run this again because this is now on my mind. Why has this done this? Okay. Oh, I forgot to do the system out. Sys out. Response. Cool. Where's
an instance?
Right, I'm going to comment that out. Run this again because I don't really understand why it's not. Oh, because it's not failing there. It's failing here. So this is what's failing. So I need to.
Yes. It
Yeah.
basically can't. It's unable to take that response and create an instance of this. Is this public? Yeah. Private. Public.
That part will be private. Oh, I wonder if maybe sometimes you have to create a blank constructor, but I thought that would just be a given. But let's see what happens if we do that. There you go. So this always catches me out, is that it likes to have a blank constructor, so the whole process of converting, so this is known as serialization and then deserialization. So we serialized an object into JSON and then we deserialized some JSON into an object. And this process uses a technique which is known as reflection, which if you want to learn more about that, I encourage you to Google about reflection because it's still kind of a bit of a dark art as far as I'm concerned, but it basically uses, like, the way it parses your responses, it uses those as keywords to try and find specific methods, but it has to create the objects to begin with. So it needs a blank constructor that does nothing just to create the object and then find the methods to like inject the values in. It's a tricky thing to explain. I don't know if that made a massive amount of sense, but there we go. So let's run that. Hey, brilliant.
Woo-hoo. But can you see it fail? That's what I want to know.
Set it to 15.
It's one of my favorite things to coach people. Like, a lot of people, they're happy, move on, job done, assertion passed. But let's actually genuinely see it fail.
Yep.
Because now I'm happy I know that it's possible it can fail. I've literally written asserts that could not fail.
Yeah.
And that is not, that defeats the point of what we're trying to do.
So last thing I want to do is I just want to clean this up and do, so we'll do a public, we'll do it like this. Because we might at some point potentially require other details of the response, not just the body, but we'll do post login and it will take a auth login request and we'll just call that payload. And then we're going to go back to our test. We're going to copy this chunk in here. Let's copy that in, and then we're going to go return the output of this. So let's do payload. Okay, response is now going to be, so we've created a payload, but we also need to create an auth API. New auth API. And and the response will be auth API dot post login, and we send the auth payload to that. So I feel like that could have some more cleanup in there. So for example, I could have it so that, like I say, that rather than post login return a response, it could return just the body auth login response, and I could drop this line out of my code. But I think that's enough for now, and that gives us what we need. All right, should we try the big one? Let's see if we can make this request, and
Got a
then
little thing that's bugging me. Why
yeah.
is IntelliJ unhappy with assert that?
Oh, because it failed. So if we run this
Oh,
again,
right.
so it's kind of like a highlighter to tell you that's a test that's failed. So if we run it again, it goes green, and it disappears.
Interesting. I've never noticed that before.
Yeah, it's handy little.
I don't
little
like
thing.
it. I don't like it.
It's nice when you've got quite a few different assertions across a class that you just need something to sort of just jump out, pop to you, or if you're like
Yes,
fixing 2 or 3 at the same time. I find it quite useful for that. But
okay.
I think it's a personal taste, personal preference, I would assume.
All right. So what I would like, so let's try and do the big one next, because I'm also still curious to know why we've got this auth login response object instead of just a response object.
Ah, right. Yes.
So I'm keen to know what the beauty, what the difference in that is. Oh,
Well,
hang on, no, it's your payload, isn't it? Sorry. It's all right. Ignore me. I cannot read code tonight. I thought it was a rest assured method. Never mind.
right. No, it's mine. But I think you touch on a good point there, which is that you could quite easily just use something like pretty print, and you could say contains a string if you were just interested. It's hard to do sophisticated assertions in codified oracles on a string, but if you knew it was like something specific, like a string that you wanted to make sure that there was like a specific value appeared, then you could just do like contain string. But with
You
this,
could, but it's so dangerous, isn't it? That's the problem there. Like you
exactly,
just said, it's not a very good assertion. Like they're taking the branding API, for example, and someone called their B&B, token,
yeah,
then you're going to have some issues. So
yeah. Okay, so let's do post branding. Well, it's actually put branding actually. So we'll update branding. Yes. So I'm gonna do a bit of code commenting here first, just to sort of spec out what we're gonna do here.
Really weird. I was about to ask you to do that. Like, creepily weird. Yeah, because this obviously we're saying let's do the big one, and it's not that big, but when you start getting sophisticated with a lot of your API automation that you'll do back on your real projects, you'll find that you have to start chaining calls. So we want to do a put, which means the system needs to know who we are. To know who we are, we have to be authorized. And the way RBP works, as we've seen here, is we get a token, and then that token has to be set as a header or as a cookie, for which then RBP would see if that's a valid token. And if it is, it will allow you to do your put or your post, or even gets on some of the APIs which are locked down.
Yeah.
So we need to call off, we need to get a token, we need to abstract the token. We then need to build our put request and send our put request and then assert on it.
Yep.
So let's do it.
So let's do that. We could create
Copy
a
and paste.
well,
Proper develop.
yeah, I'm proper elite. I mean, we could do that, or we could just for this we could create a helper method. Private. This is going to return an auth login response. Do login. And again, we might have this in its own class. And then we're going to return that. Okay. And we'll do the same here. Do login. And we can delete that. Make that all nice and clear. So again, we're keeping everything nicely encapsulated and dry, so that if we did need to make some changes, we could. and we'd only have to make them in one place. So I could do the same here. I could do auth login response, auth response equals do login. And what I can do is later on when I need it, I can call auth response dot get token, and I'll be able to drop that into my request.
Cool.
So we're going to do a put branding. So we go here, trash these. We can just press put. This is going to fail probably.
Yeah, well, let's just put a proper email in and we could fix it after.
proper@email.com. Oh.
Description can only have alpha characters and basic grammar.
Yeah, so that's...
Oh. Yeah, we bypassed our validation to achieve something we needed. Contact name can only have, well, you got a dash in it. No one's got a dash in their name, Mark. What kind of person's got a dash in their name?
So many years of testing, and I still fall into these traps as well.
Commas? It can't be commas and full stops.
It might be commas. It might be commas.
This is genius. There's loads of commas. There's one in front of devices. There's one after cloud.
Okay, that's the way to do it. Find them.
There's one over here.
Oh, how was your evening? Oh yeah, I just watched a stream of two guys removing commas from a from a list. Right.
No, still got something wrong.
You know what? Sometimes you just gotta go.
Oh yeah, have you not got Bug Magnet? I know you're not on a good browser anymore, are you? I remember now.
I think Bug Magnet does work for exceptional browsers rather than good browsers. Okay, I'm hoping that'll work. Oh, sod off.
On a joking aside, right? Test data is such an important thing to manage. You can't be more than 300 characters there.
There we go. There we go. There's the money. Right. So yes. So that's the pull request that we're going to create. Yeah. Right. So
this is a big one because you've got quite a few fields on this, haven't you?
And we've got sub-objects as well.
Oof.
Yeah. So if we go to Payloads, I'm going to create a new package. I'm going to call it branding. Then we're going to call, so the first one will be branding request. So that's going to be the main thing. So one thing I like to do as just to make it easier and clearer to myself is I like to actually take the JSON object. So you might not have seen that, but I just copied and pasted that, like copied the string. So let me use Json Lint real quick, just explode that out. Right, so I've just used this to just put it all on new lines to make it nice and clear. So what I'll do is I'll actually paste that object in here. Let's clean up some of this stuff just so it's a bit clearer. There we go. Okay, so we can now clearly see what the object is. Perfect.
You know what, Mark? You love a tool, don't you? Like you love a little project.
Yeah.
What about a Chrome extension from console to Pojo?
Oh, that would be very cool. Because there's quite.
Just had a quick Google, and I can see people have been saving it out as text files. But like we know the format for Pojos, it shouldn't be that difficult to do.
Yeah, and there are quite a lot of online tools that you can use, like web pages and stuff. But yeah, the idea.
I reckon you could probably paste that out as copy that as a JSON, and then paste that into JSON to Pojo. Which there must be a website that does JSON to Pojo. Oh, there's a JetPlanes plugin that does JSON to Pojo. Because, we love a tool, right?
Who doesn't love a tool? Okay, so yeah, we could could go down that route, but I kind of want to go through the process of creating one to kind of
I've just found one. It
to
works.
demonstrate how
Yeah.
like how you create complex pojos for requests. So we've obviously got two sub objects in here. So I'm going to call this branding contact. Okay, so yes, right. So again, what we do is we go through like the root parameters that exist in this object. So name, that's a string, but map has a sub-object. It has other values in there. So I need to create a new class called branding map. So in here, I create a class called branding map. We're going to put it in there. And then this is where what I like to do is I like to copy and paste out the subsections and just put them at the top so it's clear to me what it is I'm creating. So I'm creating an object here, which is private double latitude. One thing that creating this application has taught me is to call it longitude and not longitude. I used to put an N in there for some reason. And the amount of times my tests failed because I kept spelling it longitude rather than longitude. Fun fact there, people. Okay, so we create our empty object, we do our getters and setters, so all the same sort of stuff, but this is a sub-object to branding request. So we can do the same thing here, we do the same thing here, and we do the same thing here, and I need to create a branding contact, so let's copy and paste this. Create a class called branding, paste this in. Okay, so Json property, private string name, and this is the boring part of doing this. So we'll just do address.
It is, but like again, want to stress that earlier. Like it is, like once you've done it once, you know, it is kind of, you know, it's done, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And then JSON property private string email, and we're going to. I've realised actually we need to create two constructors. So one that's like that, and one that is empty, and then we're going to do getters and setters again. Because I've realized, it's just occurred to me that this is not just branding request, but we'll actually get this object sent back to us once we've done a put. So it's not actually branding request, it's just branding.
Yeah, it's basically the branding model, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, and we could call it something like branding model if we want to be a bit more.
Because one good thing that I believe Rest Assured will do is it doesn't try and do an exact parse. So if there's a property that's on your class that isn't in the JSON, I believe it will still parse. It will only complain when there isn't one.
Sometimes you do. I think you have to put an annotation to specifically say ignore things, but you have the flexibility to do that for sure.
Yeah.
So branding map just needs a constructor to do that. Cool. Okay, so a lot of work there to build our objects. There are tools out there that you could actually drop a JSON file in, a JSON object in, and it will actually create it all for you. I think even like the ultimate version of IntelliJ actually has that as a tool built into the IDE, which is pretty cool. Right, so we need to build our put request. So we have to then kind of construct our branding request. So we need to start with a branding map. And we'll do branding map equals new branding map. And we'll do, I don't know, -1 and 10. There's a longitude. Longitude, my God. Then we need to create a branding contact. We'll call that branding contact equals new branding contact. So it was name. So let's go Mark. Name, address, the street. Then it was
Nice.
phone.
Phone, I think.
Going for good old UK based, and then test@email.com. And then finally, we bring that all together to create the branding request. So branding, let's call it branding payload equals new branding updated BNB. We add in the branding map. Then what else do we need to add? A logo URL.
Logo description.
So what should we use as well? Let's just keep this as is for now.
Yeah, so let's just not change that. Let's just change, the name and the contact.
Yeah. A lovely description, and then finally we drop in branding contact. Right, so that is quite chunky and unwieldy. So something that's worth exploring, but I don't think we have time to do this tonight, is looking at the data builder pattern, so that you could actually just call branding, set it a bunch of variables, tell it to build, and it would actually output you something, and you wouldn't have to have multiple lines like this. Okay, so we're doing our given dot body is branding payload. This is another thing I don't like about having all the chained methods, is it screws around with IntelliJ's formatting. So we'll do a content type. And then we do put. We'll copy the put from here.
Down there, yeah.
You'd think I'd have remembered that by now, but nope. Okay, and then let's just get a response out of that. And let's just get the response.getStatus code. Cool. So we'll run this test and see what happens.
I think it will work.
Oh,
yes. We got rejected because we haven't done the token.
Yes. Right. So yeah, the thing that we've forgotten, the big deal is that we we need
it's
to
just sat there at the top, like, look at me. Why are you ignoring me?
So we need to add a cookie in, which is of auth response. So again, we can call, we can create cookies like this.
And again, this is advantage of having a library. I was at a meetup on Tuesday, and they were chatting to someone who, not with Java actually, they were using .NET, and they'd written that they were going straight ahead with HTTP client to write their automation solution. And I just recommended them check out REST Sharp, which is basically a .NET version of Rest Assured, because they were writing a lot of code that, that's why you would use something like Rest Assured and REST Sharp, because they do it for you.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. So I did new cookie like that. Then it was, so why is this moaning at me?
So now you need to put in.
Yeah, but I did so token, and then it has to be auth response dot get token, but it's still moaning at me because it's saying.
Well, no, because it's one long string, isn't it? It's token. The actual whole cookie is. God, I can't talk. Like, you don't separate them out, I don't think.
Well, yeah, but what it's moaning at is it doesn't take. Let's try.
Yeah, so one cookie is the whole string. So token semicolon, and then its value. No.
I think it's actually this, because I think I've run into that issue before, and it's actually a key value pair that you do it like that. Well, let's run that, see what happens. We got 500.
There's a thing called a cookie builder. So try cookie equals new cookie.builder. And then that takes name, so token, and then comma, the value, and that's the end of that.
Ah, I see. So we do that. Dot build. So that is a data build pattern that we've just seen there. Yeah. So then we can provide, oops, let's do that. Cookie in here. Let's see what happens. Please don't give us a 500. Ah, we're still getting a 500. Now, why are we getting a 500?
Boo.
Let's see.
Let's have a look. Yeah, what if you print out the actual? You can't print the request out, I don't think.
No message. Well, we can look at the log files. So let's go to. Let's get rid of this. Get rid of this. Actuator log file. And go all the way to the bottom. Nested. Ooh. So, so it did get through. It's just
Something's null.
not quite right. Null exception. Oh dear, there might be a bit of a... No, because it should have worked. Because when we ran it in here...
You're missing any values.
We did a submit there. That did a 200 and there was no issues there. I don't think so, no.
So let's make sure we are sending everything that's in the description, logo, map. What about name at the bottom? I don't remember seeing name.
Name is at the
I might not have been
top.
watching.
Name.
Oh.
I mean, I took this from down here. God, this is faffy though to... There we go.
Oh yeah, it's still there, isn't it?
Yep, so we've got name, we've got map. Let's maybe try and give it proper latitude and longitude values.
Is it branding contact isn't called contact?
Ah. Oh, let's do that properly. Refactor that. Yes, I think that's probably got an impact on it. So rename that to contact. Oh.
I think you would have to change the JSON property and put contact in brackets if you wanted to keep the name branding contact.
Oh, I've done this. Oh, cock a hoop. Kids, this is not how you do stuff in IDEs. Okay. All right, let's give that a crack then. See what happens. Hey! Good call. Good call. Okay, so now we can actually do something like, so let's change this response slightly. Let's assert that the contact name equals Mark, for example. So we can do branding, and then we can do dot as branding dot class. So we're reusing the same object or the same classes that we use to create our request, is because the endpoint is sending the same object back out to us afterwards to confirm that it's been created. Actually, let's change this to James. So we need to assert something. So let's say assert.
Who's James, Mark? You got something to tell me? Why not Richard? Why James?
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
James Dean is my go-to test name for some reason. Okay, so we can go response.get.
I've always wanted to live at the street.
It is lovely.
Quite
It's
nice
where all roads start. Get
All
contact,
right.
get name. Okay, so we've used that to we've chained some stuff together to get the actual string out. But again, we might want to do this somewhere else, probably not in the assertion because it's a bit ugly. But let's do this. Give it Richard. We run this. There we go.
And there's an interesting point to make here that some of you might be watching this screaming at, well, how do you know it wasn't Richard in the first place? So obviously, if this was one of our genuine real scenarios, we would have gone to the database and seeded an actual branding with the name Mark. And we would know that our seeding worked, and then we would run this scenario. So, we're not really going into dealing with the state in this example.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we would do.
Yeah.
We would control the state to know that it isn't Richard.
Yeah.
So therefore, if it comes Richard at the end, we assume that the scenario is working.
Cool. So I think
that's got to be a wrap.
Yep, it's a good place to stop.
Yeah. So I think it's very clear. To be honest, though, I want to be also quite clear that this boilerplate POJOs that we've had to do, I don't believe you can really get away with it in many of the other tools either. Like at the end of the day, you're sending a big body of data to an API, and that data has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. I think it depends on the format. So if you were using JSON and you had a tool like you were using Supertest in JavaScript, because JSON is an extension of JavaScript, you just need to call JSON parse and it'll do the work for you.
Yeah, but I'm assuming no one uses JavaScript because they're all sane. So we don't class JavaScript as a real language, Mark.
Let's not get into that right now.
No, but even with JSON though, you're still going to need a JavaScript object. Like there still needs to be something with those properties.
No, because it's JavaScript, it's smart enough to just convert it all for you because it's native to JavaScript. But if it was XML, then yes, there is the chance that you would maybe need to create a model.
Yeah, but sorry, like the data to send. So never mind in the one coming back.
Sorry, yes, yeah. Of course, yeah. For the data,
you still have to manage this. So it might feel like a tedious thing that we've had to go and create all these POJOs. But again, usually in a full blown automation architecture, you would have data code. So we mentioned data builder pattern, and we'll put some links out there to some resources on that. But yeah, you still need to manage data, just as you would have data to fill a form in. You need data to send to these APIs.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's one of the not real skills, but that's one of the most difficult things to get right. If you can get all that foundation right, managing data, then you would have been able to make these calls pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And another thing to point out there, actually, Mark, just before we quickly move on, is there's a very high possibility that those models already exist in the production system.
Yes. Yeah.
So if we actually went, are they still written in Java? So you actually probably have the model.
Yep. So
in the code.
So if we went to branding here, source main,
especially if your team are using Java, for example, and you're using Java to write it, they look a bit more complex in the model, but you could take that and delete some of those additional annotations.
Yeah.
And you would have the POJO that you need.
Yeah. So ignoring these because these are for validation, but yeah, you can see that they've all got JSON property, and we can potentially reuse those. The danger you face though, because I've had this discussion before with devs, is that it's always going to be a trade-off. If I start using production code to test the thing that I'm if I'm using part of the thing that I'm going to test as part of the construct of my test, then there is a risk that I'm going to get false positives and false negatives back. But then you have to strike that balance against the fact that you would then have to maintain a whole set of other POJOs or models somewhere else separately, and that can actually be time consuming as well. So it's just sort of working out what works for your team, what's suitable, how stable are your models as well? Are they changing a lot, or are they fairly static?
Well, again, like we could probably do a whole Twitch just on that, but on that, in that same vein, obviously, if the devs have gone a few branches ahead and you're trying to do your work and you're testing an older version, and they've updated those POJOs with new properties on the next release, you might run into issues as well.
Yep.
So it was more of like a copy and paste to get yourself going. Like you should still use your own class at the end of it, but instead of typing it all out, you could go there and take the one from production. There is websites that I just did a quick Google, Json to POJO, and there is plugins. But either way, once you know that you have to go through that journey, you then find tools to make it easy for yourself. So I tried the top one, but the top one wasn't secure, but it did work.
Yeah, I've seen that work. But yeah, just searching Json to POJO, we'll find a few bits and pieces.
But to wrap up though, a lot of applications are moving to an API-based architecture, or they're already there. So you're probably in context. So again, if you're in Java space and you're comfortable with Java already, or you are looking to get into it, rest assured it's a very good solution, and it probably is the one that's currently at the top of my list, I would say, if someone asked me for a Java API library.
Yeah, I think it's like, apart from my personal grievances with it, there are more design choices that can bias certain things, but they're not things that you can't get around anyway. So yeah, I've grown to love Rest Assured.
Awesome. So this will be added to our YouTube channel, which hopefully soon will be will have a name of /AiTOnline. But until we get 100 subscribers, YouTube will not let me rename the channel. So I think we're at about 75 or something. So even if you subscribe just so I can rename it and then unsubscribe, that would be great. But you probably want to stay subscribed. But yeah, they will be added. It will be added to our YouTube channel, and you can find previous ones there. There's also an interview on there I did recently about the 3-day course that me and Mark run called Automation and Testing.
Yep, and we've created a cool playlist of talks and stuff that we've done in the past, kind of around it as well.
Yeah, so there's lots of stuff on there, and then a write-up with frames and resources and more insight into what happened throughout this Twitch will be on automationandtesting.com. Probably be a few weeks until we get around to that, because me and Mark are about to be pretty busy.
Yes, we've got
as we are heading to Munich on Sunday to run an AIT class, and then we are in Manchester at the end of the month.
Oh, and Zurich. Don't forget Zurich class. After.
Oh, Zurich in the middle, yes. Yeah. So not next week, the week after, we are in Zurich. There is still space on that one. If anyone's watching that in between here and you can book that quickly, that would be great. And we are going to do a meetup in Zurich as well.
Yes.
Then we are heading to Sydney. We'll be doing it in Sydney in the 20-something of October or something around that date. They're all on automationtesting.com. Then we're off to Auckland, Wellington even, not Auckland, Wellington this time, to do one there. And then we're ending the year in Romania, right?
Yep, in Bucharest.
Which again is also on AIT, automationtesting.com. So if you are looking for automation training, we do that. It's not all about tools. We, as you can tell by these Twitches, we focus a lot on the theory as well. And we have a pretty cool website that I recently rebuilt. It's very snazzy. But apart from that, I think we're done, Mark.
Yep, just a couple of notable things to share is obviously RESTful Booker platform can be found on GitHub. And also the code that we've sort of gone through and demonstrated, and those patterns and the approach of structuring your API framework. Have a repository that I've worked with a bunch of other people to create. So the structure that we created tonight is here in lots of different languages. So we've got a couple for Java, we've got JavaScript, Python, Ruby, and C# as well. So if you want something to just get started with and up and running with and to play around with and run a few tests and stuff, then check out this repository and have a play with it. And I'm always open to pull requests and raising issues and ideas and stuff.
Fantastic. Apart from that, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Richard.
You
It was a
did a
good one.
lot of the hard work on that one, but it was a good one.
Yeah,
Common mistakes, got over them, bit of debugging, lots of tips and tricks. It's good.
Fantastic. Cool. All right then. Well, see you all later.
Bye, everyone.